Hello, welcome to this training presentation on our basement fire standard operating guideline. This guideline was created a little over a year ago, and one of the primary reasons is because basement fires present some of the most challenging types of fires for us. And one of the reasons that they present that challenge is because when you have a fire at that basement level, it has the ability to attack all levels of a structure. So whether you're talking a ranch or two-story, three-story, that fire can attack that structure either via natural means through the stairways if there's an open door, or if you're looking at older structures, balloon frame through the structural elements up to an upper floor. So that presents challenges to us in that we're having to go into that structure and operate on those floors, and they're compromised by fire. So we wanted to create an SOG to try to standardize our approach to basement fires, and that's the purpose of the SOG. And you may be thinking, well, I'm not a chief officer or an officer, but as we know in the volunteer fire service, you never know when you might find yourself in that right front seat or having to make command decisions. So it's important for everyone to have the understanding of these SOGs. So we're going to talk about the procedures that have been set up, and as far as the tactical approach to basement fires, and give you some understanding of how to approach them. So before we get into the components of the SOG, we're just going to cover a quick case study. And this study actually used this as part of the classroom presentation when this SOG was rolled out. And there are a number of line of duty deaths that involved basement fires that we could have chosen, but this one, it occurred in Coleraine Township, and it was just one of those ones that just stuck in my mind as having a lot of valuable lessons or hard-hitting lessons to be learned from basement fires that we can apply to why the need to have this SOG. So what happened is Coleraine Township was a career department. They were dispatched to a fire alarm, residential fire alarm, and while they were en route, the assignment was upgraded to a structural assignment. There was a fire in the building or in the house. The captain on the first arriving engine, there was some confusion with the addressing, I believe. So there was just some initial confusion, a little bit of frustration or a little bit of flustered upon arrival. The crew advanced the line to the front door, and she caught up with the crew and did not do any kind of 360 or size up of the structure. She went with them right in the front door of the house. Had she done a 360, what she would have found was that the house had a walkout basement. And this is probably the key lesson learned from this incident is if she had found that basement, she might have made the decision to instead attack that fire from that Charlie side or that basement level, as opposed to entering the house and trying to make the basement stairs. So to show you that this is the approach they went in, located the stairs to the basement, and descended the stairs with the hose line. I believe they got down to that basement level, and fire conditions were such they were forced back up out of the basement level. There were advanced fire conditions. So they went back up, and the captain ordered the crew to get out. And I think she had a crew of 3, and one of the crew members made his way outside, and when he got outside, he realized that the rest of the crew was not with him. So he went back in, followed the hose line back in, and could not find the rest of the crew. And at that point, a mayday was transmitted, and they realized that they were missing 2 firefighters. And what happened, what is believed to have happened, is that crew went from this point in the basement stairs and made their way over to this area. And this portion here is a deck, and the door here to this deck was a sliding glass door, and it's thought that they may have seen the light from that sliding glass door, thought that was a good point of egress, made their way to that door, and you can see the collapse area that had occurred in that portion of the house. So the fire, I'll show here on the next slide, you'll see the area of origin was very close to this area collapse, so it was attacking that structure of that first floor to weaken it. And so you can see here how close that area of origin where the fire originated to the collapse area, and more than likely what happened is the firefighters added their weight to that weakened floor structure. That more than likely caused that collapse into the basement level. So here you can see actual scene photos of that floor collapse. And the area of origin to the right. So it's almost disheartening to look at that picture, just realize just how close they probably were to safety, and that floor gave way on them, sending them to their deaths. So very tragic situation, but as I said, I think we need to learn from it, and there are some valuable learning points that we can apply and have applied to this SOG. So if you don't take anything from this presentation, or if you can take, I should say, one thing from this presentation, it is size up. The need for size up. And as you saw at Coleraine Township, there was a failure of size up with that incident that may have changed the tactical approach to that fire, which may have changed the outcome. So for any fire, size up is critical, and really I should say this, for any fire, what you want to do is determine early on is if you're dealing with a fire in the basement level. Okay, even obviously if it's if you have fire smoke issuing from a basement, you know you have a fire at that basement level. But even if you have fire or smoke showing on upper levels of a structure, you still need to get a look at that basement, see if there are signs that fire may still be in the basement, especially if you're dealing with an older home, balloon frame type construction home, where that fire may have traveled up through the wall cavities, the stud wall cavities to upper levels. So size up is critical. And also, if you have recognized that you are dealing with a basement fire, try to determine the extent that the fire is involved in the basement, how well involved it is. Consider the construction type. Are you dealing with newer construction where you might be dealing with lightweight floor systems, or is it legacy construction, joist construction? Maybe are you able to talk to a homeowner if they're on scene, or a neighbor, someone who might be familiar with the home, to understand, is that basement, is it a finished basement? So is the floor structure protected by drywall or some type of covering, or is it an open joist or open truss type system where it's just exposed to the elements or to that fire? So that should all be part of your size up once you've determined that it is in that basement level. So now we're going to look at the tactical options that we have, and we've set up 3 in our operating guideline. So first one, you've determined through your size up that you have the exterior access, and this one's coming from that Coleraine Township, right? It's fire at the basement level, and you have a walkout basement, or potentially you have maybe some type of stairway access into that basement, a good way in, such as like Philco doors with stairs down into that basement level. But essentially here we're talking about a walkout basement. If we've identified that we have that walkout basement, we want that first line to get into that position and make that fire attack from that entry point into that walkout basement from that direction, to avoid having to send a crew down those basement stairs or onto that first floor. The second line, their job, or what you need to do when consider early on, is to get a second line into place, into a position that, one, they can kind of do some reconnaissance to determine if that basement door is open or is it holding back the fire. So, or do you have fire traveling up those stairs affecting that first floor? And one thing about that is this is gonna come from your size up, but making that determination of how far you're going to put that crew out onto that first floor to do that is going to be a tough decision. But if you do your size up, if you have some idea how well involved that basement is, what are the conditions, is going to determine that. But at the very least, if you're not sure you can put a crew out onto that floor, that first floor above that basement fire, get them in a position where they can protect that first floor with the hose line to try to prevent fire travel from spreading throughout the house from an exterior point. And this is essential if we're going to do any type of primary search in that structure. If a truck company is going in, if you're doing vent enter search up on if it's multiple story up on the second floor, or if you do decide that you can get a crew out, they're out searching that above that fire floor, get this line into place for protection, that second line. Okay, so this scenario, first line to the basement or through the walkout, second line in a protective position for first floor, or for that first floor, main floor, trying to prevent fire exposure. One thing too, I'll mention it here, is if we're putting crews out over top of a floor, I know we train on sounding floors with tolls, with your foot out in front of you, and not saying that you don't need to do those things or that they're not beneficial, but keep in mind that there's no method or technique like that is a reliable indicator that you're going to have a catastrophic floor collapse like you saw in that earlier picture with the Coleraine Township fire. Okay, so still want to do those things. There might be a small hole starting or something that you can detect, but just realize that it's not a foolproof method. And really, no method's going to be completely foolproof. The size up is critical, trying to determine how much of a volume of a fire you have in the basement. What that construction is like. Are you dealing with lightweight construction, finished basement, protected ceiling versus non? All those things can help weigh in your decision, but just keep in mind that completely relying on methods of sounding floors is not going to be completely reliable method. So next scenario, this is a structure where you have no exterior basement, but you've determined that the stairs are still tenable. So you've done your size up and you realize that, hey, it's a small fire in the basement, or it's just getting started, it's smoky, whatever be the case, you're able to determine that. So this scenario, your first line is going to go in on the main entry on the first floor, and they're going to find that basement access and get a line down into the basement. Now, one thing's very critical, even if you suspect you're dealing with a small fire in this scenario, is you need to get down those basement stairs as fast as you can, safely, but you don't want your crews hanging out on those stairs. So get that line deployed down the stairs rapidly. And for those of you who attended the classroom session, may remember we went over some techniques and that were maybe a little bit different than what you may have learned in Essentials, where you go down feet first and face backwards. We use techniques where you went down on your butt, you kept the nozzle out and ahead of you, and you had that nozzle for protection, potentially even to help if you had some fire coming up, but you're still able to get down there. You're able to flow as you go. Those of you who went through the nozzle forward class, we went over techniques to accomplish that. But the key point is it's got to be a quick operation. You can't linger. You can't have crews hanging out on those stairs. Get that line down there as fast as you can. The second line in this scenario is going to be your backup, and they're going to stay at a position to just try to be in a protective position, either near that basement door entryway or somewhere on that main floor, to try to provide some protection. If you have windows in this scenario in the basement, try to coordinate your ventilation, understanding it's going to be limited. Most basement windows smaller if you're dealing with an older home especially, but if you're dealing with a newer home with livable basement space, you're most likely going to have egress windows down there, larger windows that might be of some benefit for ventilation purposes. So the third tactical option, this is you have no exterior access and you've determined that your steers are not tenable. You have a well-involved fire, or maybe you're just short-staffed. You have 2 people on the engine, and you need to get additional staffing there before you want to make entry into that structure. So all those things may come into play where you want to use this option. In this scenario, first line is going to attempt an exterior knockdown through an exterior window, exterior entry point. Try to get that fire, the main body of that fire knocked down, or at least controlled, until you're able to make entry into that basement level. This may also be an application where we use piercing nozzle. We don't have them, but if we have another company, if someone is able to bring like a basement nozzle, something like that into play to get more of a sprinkler type flow into that basement level as a consideration, but understanding that can be a difficult operation to put into place, but it may provide one option for you. Second line in this scenario is, even though that other line is not making entry into the basement, is to get into that protective position. So if fire does start to come up through onto the main floor, you can try to prevent advancement through the rest of the house from a relatively protected position, an exterior entry point. And this is absolutely critical if in this scenario you're putting crews in to do primary search on that main floor or upper floor, as I discussed before. So those are the 3 main tactical options. Hopefully that should be pretty simple to remember, but they're simple to remember, but critical in their application of being able to determine when to utilize those. Okay, so just finishing up here on the key points, summarizing. As I mentioned before, size up is critical. Get that information, and especially if you know you're dealing with a basement fire, get as much information as you can to make those critical decisions about, do you want to be putting a crew out on that main floor? Do you want to try to make the basement stairs? The next point there of finding best access, that's part of size up. Don't be getting that tunnel vision, kind of like we saw with the Coleraine Township, where you're just going in the front door because that's what you always do. That exterior access, that walkout basement, is going to be your friend in this basement fire type situation. So size up, size up, size up as much information as you can gather to make those decisions. Third point, getting that second line in place to protect that first floor from extension. from a relatively protected position, either at an exterior entry point or just inside, so that one, we can hopefully prevent if the basement door fails, if we're doing one of those other options where we can't make that basement, or if the basement door is open, we can try to prevent that extension from the rest of the structure. Or absolutely critical, if we're sending a crew in to go either on that main floor or up to upper floors to do primary search, that second line needs to be in place to protect those crews. As I mentioned, the interior stair descent is critical. Don't linger on those stairs. Get that line down there. As I said, we talked about some techniques for doing that to make it a little bit more rapid, a little bit more safe, a little bit more in a protected position than techniques we've been taught in the past. So if you're not familiar with those techniques, let us know so we can work on that. It's critical, like I said, to get down those stairs as fast as we can and do so in a protected manner. And finally, there's no truly reliable method to sound floors. And not saying we don't sound floors, but just understand that catastrophic failure, like we saw in the Coleraine Township, you're most not likely going to find that by sounding the floor with the tool. So that's why, going back to that first point of size up, trying to gather information as far as how well involved that fire is in the basement, what the floor structure is like, all that information we talked about is critical for making decisions on how long, or if you want to send crews out onto a floor that's over top of a fire. Okay, so those are the key points in this. Really, this whole presentation provides the main points from this SOG. So please take the time to log in and review the whole SOG when you can. And availability, it is available on our emergency reporting account. So if you have that, you log in, go to the library section, and the most current SOG document is in there. You can get it there. You should have your one that was emailed out. The last time it was emailed out was in 2017. This SOG is on that, hasn't changed, so that's still good to look at. And you have the hard copy version that is in the radio room at Station 1. So take some time to refresh yourself that way as well. As I said, this is all good information. Doesn't matter. You never know when you might have to make these critical decisions at a fire like this. So take the time to learn these points. Thanks for listening, and stay safe.